Hey everyone, looking at the 11-game slate here for July 30th. 3 things to pay attention to. Hunter Brown, Robbie Ray, and the MLB trade deadline. Now those things are not all combined. They don't all link together. I don't expect Brown and Ray to get traded. However, the MLB trade deadline is today at 6 p.m. Eastern time. So we have an hour before lock for all the news to kind of settle down and adjust our lineups as such. But still, make sure you're paying attention throughout the day of all the trades and the news that does go on. We'll be talking about it in our Discord. So come join us. We'd love to have you. FSiDFS.com is our website, and then you can find all the links and pricing and everything there. Now, Hunter Brown, Robbie Ray. I really expect these guys to get extremely popular. A lot of high projected ownership on them. However, you need to make a decision for yourself. At what number do I say this is too much where I'm going to be fading them, or it's not enough and I'm going to be overweight on them? It is an 11-game slate. So should anybody really be X high owned? No, I mean, ownership should be fairly spread out. Like, there's tons of options, but you have to decide what you want to do. So we do have the sheet. We'll pull that up here in a little bit, but let's just talk about some of these pitchers and where I think it all is going to shake out. Hunter Brown, we are going to be starting with him. This guy has been just the absolute epitome of consistency and floor. He just goes out and he's getting you 20 to 25 DK points. He's getting you 6 innings, less than 3 earned runs every single start. Every single start. So he is awesome. 9K price tag is very nice. He's gotten a little bit of a reduction from his 9.4 in his last start, but he's facing off against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, they don't strike out a whole heap ton, and they're not the worst offense in the league. It's not like he's facing off against, the White Sox or a super high strikeout team like Seattle. But regardless, Pittsburgh is not an offense that you should be terrified of. And so I think Brown is going to see a whole lot of ownership just because of the floor and the consistency that he does bring at this salary price tag. You just have to make the decision for yourself. How much ownership is too much ownership where you're deciding to fade him? But I really do think he's probably going to be the most popular option, especially in cash games on the board here. Staying up in this higher salary tier, and we'll talk about Robbie Ray here in a second, but staying up in this higher salary tier, you got Glasnow, higher upside pitcher. He's that guy that is more than capable of getting you those double-digit strikeout games. Facing off against San Diego, a team that does not strike out a lot at all. I think actually they're dead last. I haven't looked at the ranking, the strikeouts rate in about a week or so, but I think that San Diego is the lowest strikeout rate team in the entire league at around 18% against right-handed pitching. So Glasnow, he's got his work cut out for him, and especially at that $10,000 salary price tag, I do see his ownership getting down a little bit when you mix those two things together. However, I don't expect salary to be too much of an issue here. We'll talk about builds once we get after the pitching. But I mean, when we're looking at teams like Kansas City and teams like Seattle and San Francisco, like there's a lot of very good value that is out there. So Glasnow, he's fine. He's not a fade, but definitely a GPP play for me. Castillo, really intriguing. 9.2K facing off against Boston. He's looked a lot better in his past couple of starts. He's got 4 straight quality starts. So 6 innings pitched or longer with 3 or fewer earned runs. But again, we've talked about him for a couple videos now, I feel, in a row, where the strikeout rate has not been where we've seen in years past. Now, it is coming around in a little bit, but still, it's not near what he is capable of or what we've seen in previous years. And he's facing off against Boston. Like, this is a really tough matchup for right-handed bats. It is a lineup that is just chock full of lefties. And I can't remember if I brought up the video here, but we do have, this is the highest over-under on the board at 9.5 in this game. We're also looking at maybe 15-mile-an-hour winds blowing out in Fenway. So we got to make sure we're taking all this into account. So while Castillo has looked a little bit better as of late and could be a nice GPP play, I got some hesitations here going with Castillo. I'd much rather have Michael Wacha, who is $500 cheaper. Can't believe I'm saying I'd rather have Michael Wacha, but 8.7K He's been pretty consistent as of late. He's facing off against this White Sox team that he just struck out 7 times, allowed no earned runs in 7 innings pitched, and had 30 DK points. Gotta have some interest in there. So I do actually like Waka quite a bit here. Wouldn't shock me if he sees quite a bit of ownership in cash as well. So I guess maybe Brown, Waka, and Ray. But I still think it's going to be Brown and Ray getting the majority of it because people don't want to trust Michael Waka in their cash games. Steele, kind of left over, facing off against Cincinnati. It's a higher strikeout matchup, but I'm just a little bit nervous about that small ballpark. But, I mean, the upside could definitely still be there. So, when I was ranking all these high salary guys, I'm going to go with Brown, number 1. I'm going to put Glass now just with his upside, really. I could understand maybe putting Waka ahead of Glass now just with the floor and the pricing and all of that and the matchups. But then Castillo and Steele rounding things out. Going into the mid-tier, Robbie Ray. He's up at the top. He's going to be like the Hunter Brown. Like, I really expect quite a lot of ownership on him. He's facing off against Oakland. Now, Oakland has been one of the best offenses in July coming out of the All-Star break. Like, we can't ignore that fact. But we also can't ignore that Robbie Ray being priced at 8.2K does seem a little bit silly. He came back from his long rehab. Last start was his first start, and he was pretty shaky in terms of his command and his control. It was against the Dodgers. This is a much better matchup facing off against Oakland, but still, I don't think that's going to really concern me. Like, he seemed to get it together by the end of the game, but I remember that first inning was just looking really dicey in terms of, okay, we were walking guys, we're getting into like 3-0 and 3-1 counts consistently. But still, 8.2K, I think he's going to see quite a bit of ownership. If it's not Ray, people are probably going to be flocking to Waka. No. Probably going to be going over to Waka, but I still think that Ray and Brown is going to be a pretty popular 1-2 punch, especially in cash games. We got Max Scherzer right behind him in my rankings here for the mid-tier, facing off against St. Louis. Now, Scherzer, he's seen some ups, he's seen some downs. Just those ups and downs have occurred in his past 2 starts. However, they've been against vastly different offenses. Baltimore, terrifying. Chicago White Sox, not so much. But facing off against St. Louis here, more of the middle of the road pack. They did trade away. Who'd they trade away yesterday? They were part of trades, and I can't remember. Edmund, Gorman. Man, there were so many. I can't keep it all together. But pay attention to the St. Louis lineup. It's definitely not a lineup that you should be nervous about. Scherzer, the one concern I do have with him is that he's just not inducing a whole heap ton of swinging strikes or swing and misses, whatever you want to define it as. So it has really cut down on his strikeout rate. However, St. Louis, I think it's a nice matchup. I do really like him, especially at his 8.5 salary price tag. After him, we're going to go with Lance Lynn facing off against Texas, but pay attention to the Texas lineup. It could be, I think Josh Young might be back in. He was reinstated on Sunday, I think, but they've still kept him out of the lineup. I think that he potentially could be back in here tonight. If so, it's going to be a big boost to that Texas middle of the order. It's going to actually have a little bit less interest for me with Lynn, but if he's still out, Lynn I think is fine. Once we get past Scherzer, though, I do want to preface this before we get into everything else. Once we get past Scherzer in the salary range, and this is like Lynn included, it's just really muddy. It's really murky. There's not anybody that I'm like, woohoo, get excited about. Even over here in the cheap tier, I got Canning up at the top, but it took a lot to convince me to put him there. It's really ugly. I'm definitely going to be sticking more towards the high salary when I am picking my pitchers. Brown, Waka, Ray, Scherzer. I feel like those are the 4 that I'm going to have a whole lot of interest in terms of safety, and then Glass now more for the upside. But yeah, it gets really ugly, really muddy down here. I almost don't even want to dive too deep into it and spend a lot of time on it just because it is so murky and gray. Minaya, he just allows a lot of home runs, but he had that month and a half long stretch not too recently ago where he was looking really consistent, really solid. but the home run issues and control issues are starting to creep back up with him. Canning, I mentioned, I'm not super excited about it, but he is sub 7K facing off against Colorado. He's a pitcher that's capable of going 90 to 100 pitches. He's capable of getting 5+ strikeouts. But again, am I excited about it? No. But is the potential for him to go out there and get you 5 to 6 innings with 5 strikeouts and allowing 2-3 earned runs? Yeah, absolutely. And I think with that possibility of a pitcher doing that at sub 7K at home against a weak opponent, you got to have a bit of interest in there. So I think I'm going to wrap up the pitching talk there. I don't want to get too lost into this murkiness because honestly, it's really murky. Don't get too excited. Cincinnati, though, starting pitcher has not been determined yet. DK does have Martinez. If it is indeed Martinez, no interest in him. He's more of a reliever, and it's just going to be a bullpen game for Cincinnati. And then Milwaukee, they're also to be determined. I haven't seen anything on this Milwaukee starting pitcher, so can't rank them too much because of that. And because Milwaukee doesn't have anybody ranked at this point in time, it does mean that I don't really have any thought on the Atlanta Bats. They're just kind of like tucked over here in the corner. I guess this should be like an Atlanta TBD, based on the Seattle or based on the Milwaukee starting pitcher. So looking at the bats, a lot of top bats that I really do like here today. Kansas City, Seattle, Arizona being the 3 primary ones that I am having quite a bit of interest in. Arizona is facing off against who are they facing off against? Patrick Corbin for Washington. We love picking on Patrick Corbin. The Arizona offense is doing very well. Pay attention to see if Christian Walker is going to be in. He got taken out of the game mid-game last night. There they are. So he is day-to-day, but pay attention to that. But still, this Arizona team is phenomenal against left-handed pitching, one of the better offenses in the league against left-handed pitching over the course of the year. Corbin, he allows a lot of hard contact, and when he's off, he is really off. Ketel Marte, he's obviously going to be the first guy that you're going to be putting into your lineups if you are going to be going with the larger stack. He's just been on fire. He's been hitting the ball very well. But if it wasn't going to be Marte as my number one, I would go with Gurriel Jr. as my number one. But the other two teams I do want to talk about is going to be Seattle and Kansas City. These teams are both very affordable to jam into your lineups. And again, even if you go with Brown and Ray as your 2 starting pitchers, I don't think salary is going to be too much of an issue. You can even jam a guy like Bobby Witt here at 6.4K. Favorite play on the board of any team, forget salary, all that kind of stuff. Bobby Witt, favorite player on the board. But you're going to be looking for the Kansas City lefties facing off against Cannon, and then that Chicago White Sox bullpen. And then Seattle facing off against Paxton. Paxton is back in Boston. He pitched for Boston, last season, and then he got traded, and then he was with the Dodgers, and he just couldn't strike anybody out while he was with the Dodgers. So now he's back in Boston, but he's got a high strikeout matchup against Seattle. However, Paxton doesn't strike out a whole heap ton of guys, so I think that does play into Seattle's favor. It's kind of like their kryptonite. This is why I don't talk superheroes. Their biggest issue is striking out a ton. So now they're facing a pitcher who doesn't strike out a whole lot of guys, so get rid of their worst flaw, and boom, they're going to be much better. But combining those two teams, so throwing in guys like the lefties of Kansas City, like Pasquantino, I think at second base, it's going to be a big decision. Do you want to go with Massey, who is going to be leading off for Kansas City, but has just looked really, really rough as of late? He's not hitting the ball well at all. Or do you go with Polanco, who's 500 cheaper in the upper middle of the lineup? Nice righty-lefty matchup, 3.6K. He's been hitting the ball very well. You can see he's averaging over 10 DK points in his past 10. But really, it's more so the home run upside that he can bring. I really like that with him. But more of a boomer bust kind of guy. So Pasquantino, Polanco, Witt. Who's the other guy that I really wanted to highlight? I'm blanking I'm blanking. Obviously, pay attention to Arozarena if he's going to be in. Oh, Robles, 3.3K, super cheap. Could be leading off for Seattle here in a nice righty-lefty matchup. He's been hitting the ball well. He just doesn't bring you that upside that, you know, Blanco, Rosarena, like those higher salary tier guys are going to be getting. But he's a guy that can get on base and, you know, score some runs and get his salary paid off in that regard. But you can quickly see, like, you do a nice with Bobby Witt, Brown, and Ray, Pasquantino, like some solid bats and pitching. We're still looking at almost 4K remaining for the rest. So I don't think that salary is going to be too much of an issue. But I do really like Seattle. I do really like Kansas City in their matchups. Boston facing off against Castillo. I mentioned Castillo, like, he's looked a lot better lately, but he's just not what he has been over the course of, you know, the past few seasons. And Boston just really does very well against right-handed pitching. So honestly, Boston could be more over into this GPP category. It's one of my favorite GPP stacks as well. But Minnesota and the Mets, they're going to kind of be like, I want to target that game. We talked about how 15-mile-an-hour winds out in Boston. This is the highest over-under game. I really like this weather conditions over here for the Mets. Almost 20-mile-an-hour winds blowing straight out for the majority of the game. Pay attention to the rain, though. Looks like there could be maybe some showers in the area, so look for that. But still, we talked about how Shamanaya has issues with home runs, and 20-mile-an-hour winds blowing out is not what you want when you are a pitcher that struggles with allowing home runs. Minnesota, great offense. Let me pull up these guys here. Minnesota, great offense against left-handed pitching. I always view them as like a team that's full of lefties that should be doing better against right-handed pitching, but their numbers actually suggest they hit lefties a little bit better. So guys like Royce Lewis, Buxton, obviously going to be forefront and leading the charge there. But yeah, if you want to game stack this, I could totally understand that as well. The salaries for these teams are a little up there, much more expensive than the Kansas City and Seattle bats, but I do like the upside and the home run upside and the weather conditions for this game. Heading over into the cheap tier, Texas, pay attention if Josh Young's in there, even more interest in Texas with that. And then into the cheap tier, San Francisco, Angels, Washington. I think that San Francisco is going to be my favorite amongst the bunch. Let me pull them up here. Facing off against Oakland, facing off against JP Sears. Oh, Sears. He's another pitcher that I did want to talk about. I do have him over here in the 150 max. Paxton's there as well. I mentioned how Seattle, you know, they're a very high strikeout team. So Paxton doesn't get a whole lot of strikeouts himself, but when you're facing off against a team that strikes out at a 30% clip, maybe today's the day that Paxton gets 6-7 strikeouts, and he does very well, pays off his salary, and gets you that, you know, GPP win. Sears. This guy has been the ultimate boom bust. Like, we talk about boom bust pitchers like Aaron Nola and those kind of guys, but this guy has taken that to the next level. He has not scored in between 0 and 15 DK points in like the past month and a half. Like, he is either getting you 20 to 25 DK points or he's getting you -5. Like, there is no in between with Sears. So I think that Houston could be a really intriguing GPP option. Not Houston. San Francisco could be a really intriguing GPP option. But at the same time, still trust them because they are cheap and they are affordable. Soler, he just got traded. Don't pay attention. Yeah, right down here. He just got traded to Atlanta, so obviously don't put him into your lineups. But yeah, really do like San Francisco and the affordability that they can bring against a pitcher who, when he is off, he is really, really off. So hopefully this was able to just kind of guide you in the right direction. These are not cores by any mean. If you want the cores, come and join us in our Discords. We can talk about the trade deadline throughout the course of the day, and then talk about a sheet that looks just like this that we post. So we have the showdown cores listed up here. We got the tiers listed down here. You can see I started to play around with builds and what it could look like. This is not guaranteed to stay this way with Brown and Ray. But I do the cash cores. Matt Noah does the GPP cores. Mega Roller looks at cash and GPP for FanDuel. And then we talk about weather, all that stuff. So come join us. We'd love to have you. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this was able to guide you in the right direction where you want to go tonight. But 11-game slate. get crazy, get wild, and we will be back tomorrow for some Wednesday action. See ya.